This video is going to be my second preview of the NFC Divisional Round showdown between the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to focus this one on the defense that Robert Saleh and the 49ers are going to bring to Seattle. Can they put together a second consecutive defensive gem, right? They just faced a Philadelphia Eagles offense that, to be quite honest with you, has provided some fool's gold to people in 2025. I'm thinking of when the Detroit Lions go to Philly and lose a 16-9 game. Their defense played spectacular, and coming out of that game, there was a lot of positives for Lions fans and for myself as someone who tries to analyze the game. And things just did not work out thereafter for Detroit's defense and Kelvin Shepard. The Eagles only averaged 22 points per game this year with all that talent, right? And that's just 19th in the league. Really inconsistent when you watch the film of them, number one. Number two, the statistical production as well for guys like Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown. Nonetheless, I think San Francisco and Robert Saleh, they deserve a ton of credit, man. Along with some of the underrated, or in one case, really unknown guys that helped them get enough stops, including the final one. In the final minute of the game, with their backs against their own end zone, San Francisco is able to get a stop and force another NFC West showdown, this one with the Seahawks. Some guys that I'll talk about here in terms of how they played in the wild card win in Philadelphia, but also what Seattle might do to try to attack them. Eric Kendricks, a veteran inside linebacker that you see on your screen, 10 tackles, very smart, played very smart, good in coverage in that game. As far as his coverage consistency, played, I would say, to the height of his ability based upon the film that I had seen in previous years in Dallas and in Minnesota. Bryce Huff, extremely physical on some of the reps that I'll show you, very aware on at least one screenplay, if not a second one, essentially put himself in position to take away options for Jalen Hurts and in fact make some plays against the run. And then finally, the unknown Garrett Wallow, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, 26-year-old inside linebacker, I think played at TCU, came into the game with, I think, 40 career tackles, and then he had 11 on Sunday. I'm going to focus much of this video on what Kendricks and Wallow were able to do against the run, in coverage, how they were able to adapt both pre- and post-snap to what they saw from Jalen Hurts and the Eagles' offense, and then try to project how Clint Kubiak and Sam Darnold might try to expose those guys in certain instances. I've got a significant number of plays here. This is dual purpose, all right? So this is a film study preview of the Seahawks and the 49ers rematch, the third time that they're played this season, of course. But also, to be real, I watched the 49ers win over the Eagles, and I was struck by the play of some of these inside linebackers, some of the things they were able to do, being so far down on the depth chart, or in the case of, Kendrick, someone who wasn't even on the roster until November. He only had, I think, 3 tackles coming into the game for 2025. Wallow had 4. Nonetheless, they were able to go to Philly, get a win. Jalen Hurts, 35 total passes attempted, only 168 yards, despite only being sacked once. So how do you make that make sense? And then A.J. Brown, 3 catches on 7 targets. What's San Francisco going to do to try to hold JSN and Seattle's run game down in a similar fashion? And can they actually accomplish it? We'll get the film started here. I know that was a quite lengthy lead-in, but I had a lot to say, number one. And number two, like I said, I want to try to give respect to what the San Francisco 49ers defense was able to do and give you as a Seahawks fan, hopefully who's watching still, an idea of what they might attempt to do to take certain things away depending on the personnel group and the formation. So first possession, San Francisco obviously went down and scored, and the Eagles are going to match it. This is what I would call an RPO hide concept. It's been in the Eagles playbook for years, really dating back to like 2021. What I think is notable about it is, it's a give. It could be a give to Saquon Barkley based upon the read of this defensive end, or it could be a keep by Jalen Hurts. Sometimes he'll run this out into the flats himself personally, but more often you get the tight end leaking out underneath of the heels of the offensive line. So we're talking about running out behind the offensive line and away from this edge defender, such that Jalen Hurts turns this into really a triple option. The first option would be the give to Saquon Barkley. Second option would be to keep it, get outside to the edge, but you can see there's an edge defender, defensive end there to kind of front him up. And then the third option, the tight end out in the flats. What I think is notable here, and why it's the first play that I chose, is Eric Kendricks is the inside linebacker on the wrong side. And so what I mean by that is he's located here with another inside linebacker located closer to Saquon Barkley on the same side. And A.J. Brown is typically going to be assigned to go and kind of wall off that inside linebacker, kind of maybe sit down his route, effectively act as a pick concept because, it ends up being, it could be a pass play. So he's not going to block that guy. But Brown recognizes that inside linebacker is gone. So he's not going to be able to make the play because he's moved in this direction. And so Brown leaves him alone because that's what he's coached to do. And as a result, Kendricks is the first guy to get there, and he's from the other side. My point is he's an older inside linebacker, I think over 1,100 career tackles, didn't sign with their team until November. Of course, I would expect Seattle to try to attack him and Garrett Wallow in the pass game for sure. On this night against the Eagles, perhaps because of the slow pace of play that Philadelphia offers, his recognition, his awareness was a huge asset on Sunday. I think Seattle's got to be aware, and from a game planning standpoint, that this is a guy that's going to show up prepared to play, and he can pretty much get San Francisco in the right look, even though he's only been on the team for about 2 months. Not sure if I explained it in the lead-in, but connecting with the game from a defensive side of the ball, number one, personally, and then number two, being an inside linebackers coach. That's why I'm so appreciative and kind of highlighting what these guys did. So this is going to be Kendricks downhill on the second possession. It's a 7-7 tie. He's just very technical with the things that he does. So it's a Jill ISO concept, and what I mean by that is the left tackle step out to the defensive end, then the wing wide receiver 80, which is really a pre-snap tell as far as what they might be doing, meaning he's not a huge receiver threat, number one. Number two, in a compressed formation, almost kind of giving away that it's going to be, an insert block into the B gap in this case. In addition, Devontae Smith is also working up to the second level. The difference in stances here is clear for me. I'm talking about between the 49ers guys and the Eagles guys. The Eagles offensive line been in really poor stances, if you ask me, throughout much of the year. I recognize that at this level of football, it's kind of, the pattern now that as far as what people want their guys to do, fine. But then don't be surprised that A, they have trouble adjusting to different tracks or guys stunting, which is what San Francisco did a lot of, or B, that you're not able to get, great push down the field. But in any case, you can see the combo by the guard. He's going to try to work up to Kendricks. 80 is going to go to the nickel DB, Upton Stout. And Kendricks is going to press that guy off of him, stay in the gap. He can't really get it. The left guard can't really get his feet situated because they kind of end up tripping over the defensive tackle. So, that's part of this here, why Kendricks makes it look so easy. But when you watch the Eagles offense, you constantly see this dynamic whereby offensive linemen are blocking and they almost start to look back or wait for the whistle to blow. It's almost like their drills are too short, if you will. For the research that I had when I was still coaching high school football, the average football play lasts 7 seconds, or that's what we tell our kids. It could be a little more or a little less at the NFL level for sure. But the point is, you've got to train your players to play for that length of time. Think of a boxer, 3-minute rounds, MMA guys, 5-minute rounds. You've got to train them to compete for that amount of time. Generally, if you ask me, the Eagles' offensive line looked like in this game, watching it live and on film, that they were only ready to compete for a certain amount of time. And some of these plays, it ended up being to their detriment. Same play from the end zone angle. Left tackle stepping out to the D end. Wide receiver inserting up to go get Kendricks. They're going to combo. Wide receiver inserting up to go get the nickel safety. They're going to combo with the left guard. And he's going to be the guy that works up to Kendricks. I misspoke there for a moment. And just does a really nice job of making first contact with his hands. You can see him reach out for the left guard, get his hands to the inside, and situate his body to the outside. Basically, the old school axiom, keep your outside arm free. And most of the time in this game, what I saw was the 49ers D-line, in particular their inside linebackers as well, I should add, playing with a better pad level than the Eagles' offensive line did. For lack of a better word, I think Philly's offense for most of 2025 looked quite lazy. Now, having said that, they still ran for 140 yards, but it took 36 carries to get that done, 3.9 per carry. Seattle's going to be looking at, wanting to get to that 145, 150 mark, but only taking 28, 29, 30 carries to get that done. This is one of my favorite plays that you see a ton of teams running, not just at the NFL level, but in college football as well. It's an RPO look, if you will, but I call it down sweep into the boundary. I think both inside linebackers for San Francisco played really well. Kendricks had 10 tackles. Wallow had 11. In this case, you normally, as an inside linebacker set to the field, are expecting, okay, 3 could be running a slant behind me to replace with the running back cross in face, so you're put in some type of conflict. Do you want to go now with the running back and attack the run play? In that case, the quarterback could keep it and throw it to the right now slant. Do you want to slow play it and hold off and stay in this window? That could cause the quarterback to give it, which is what occurs here. So it's an RPO with a sweep path is what I'll call it. The concept for me is down sweep. I think the 49ers D-line played quite well. They were getting upfield. I don't want to say like a penetrating mindset, but they definitely were declarative in terms of where they were going. In this case, the left tackle blocks down. It allows Wallow, the boundary side inside linebacker, to come downhill right now. And you can see Kendricks is kind of slow playing this because he's not looking, but he's thinking, okay, I probably got a backside slant. This to me is just an illustration for you as a Seahawks fan to say, okay, it's a very experienced player. Number one, where's he going to be? He's going to be set to the field, the Mike linebacker. All right? Think Ernest Jones IV as the Mike. Wallow is going to be into the boundary, the will. Think Drake Thomas. That's generally how these guys line up. In this case, you can see it is a give, like I kind of described in the lead-in for the play. Kendricks is late to it, but Wallow does a really nice job, if you ask me, dealing with one of the pulling offensive linemen. I think it's the center, and those guys hold off Barkley for a 2-yard gain. It should be said that Barkley did run for 106 yards, right, on only 26 carries. So maybe more touches for him would be the antidote for Philly, if you will. But the offense was really stagnant, slow-moving, and rudderless, in my opinion. I think Seattle would like to possess the ball for long stretches, win the time of possession. I do wonder if you're going to see a little bit of tempo at some point early in the game for Seattle. This is the same play from the end zone angle. Forgive me if I, maybe belabored the point. I call it down sweep. And it's normally with the running back set to the field, and he'll cross the quarterback's face on a sweep path. Normally get your foot down, put your foot in the ground, and cut downhill at some point. Keep in mind, we got trips off screen to our left. Devonta Smith is just off screen to our left, so that's why Eric Kendricks is kind of slow playing this. The concept is you get a down block by the left tackle on the defensive tackle, the 3 technique, a kick out block by the front side guard, in this case the left guard, and then the center wrapping up to go get Wallow. Again, I'm calling him the will linebacker. It's a boundary side play off of an RPO look. You can see Jalen Hurts specifically looking at Kendricks. Don't expect to see a ton of this, from Seattle, obviously. I think that the style of offense is going to be different. Sometimes this is just the appearance of a read, right? You're making it look like you're reading a player, and you're really not. Smith's route and even A.J. Brown's off screen to our left, but to the Eagles' right. A little bit lazy, which speaks to my point. I don't think they were a very well-coached offense at the NFL level. I think they were allowed to play in stances that were somewhat lazy, and they didn't look super prepared for this game. I'm not trying to run down what San Francisco did on defense. I was pretty explicit in the lead-in that I want to give them credit. Having said that, I think Seattle's going to come out on offense with a different activity level, a different pace of play, perhaps. They being Seattle's averaging 171 rushing yards per game in the last 3 weeks. But even if you extrapolate that out, I think over the last 9 games, you're talking about 1,200 yards rushing. Charbonnet and Walker, obviously a huge part of that. Look, if you don't know, in the last 3 games, Walker is at 5.9 yards per carry, so 42 rushes for 248 yards. Charbonnet on the other side, 44 carries for 216. That's 4.9 yards per carry. That's all of those stats for those guys is in their last 3 games as a team. Combo, total output, I should say, per game is 171. I have a theory about it that's a little bit of a working theory, maybe I'll get to at the end. It's really related to JSN's offensive explosion for the first 2/3 to 70% of the season. This is kind of a cool adjustment that the 49ers show. Still on the second possession, it's a 3rd and 2. And when I say adjustment, I'm talking about this unbalanced look, tackle over, if you will, that the Eagles are presenting. It's a 13 personnel group. Like I said, in the first quarter, they're going to read this defensive end with Saquon Barkley kind of, crossing the quarterback's face, and they're getting a little bit on a downhill path. It's a little bit, I would call it like a 3-4 over or 5-2 over. So what they've done is they've called the strength to the unbalanced side, which makes sense. It's a 3-man surface. You also do have a 3-man surface back here. The difference is that 2 of these guys are tight ends. So compare that to a traditional, what we would call underfront, where this defensive tackle will be kicked over in the A-gap, and this 2-eye or A-gap defender would be kicked back in the backside B. There's the 2 tight ends. It's really a dual, or 2 of the 3 tight ends, I should say. It's really kind of a dual read between Jalen Hurts and the tight end who's set up in the backfield. I call this formation jokers, when you have one running back to each side of the quarterback who is in the shotgun. So when I say dual read, I'm talking about Jalen Hurts and this tight end both reading that defensive end. It's a concept that, the Seahawks don't really run, probably unless, it's stuff that like Jalen Milroe has worked on. But the idea is if this defensive end steps down, then Jalen Hurts could keep it and run out behind that tight end who's also reading the defensive end. In this case, the tight end and Hurts kind of read it differently, number one, or it's possible that it's not a read. It's just for show. Right? It's just to widen that defensive end up. In this case, 91 does a great job of staying flat, and then he'll fold down underneath. You also get, I think, a pretty good job by the 3 technique to the unbalanced side. I'm talking about 99 here. Really nice job of 91 showing his athleticism, like I said, to fold down. The defensive tackle, the 3 technique, I think does a really good job of kind of setting the guard up to the inside. Jair Brown, the boundary side safety, is actually going to that inside gap, the same gap that the defensive tackle sheds to. In terms of how the Seahawks might look at this and try to attack, I wonder about, having someone, maybe 2 running backs on the field. In this case, the Eagles have a tight end, crossing the face of the quarterback, really what I would refer to as split flow, and seeing if they can get this inside linebacker, in this case it's Kendrick set to the boundary, to cross the midline as well. Allow the running back to kind of intentionally try to work it over here, basically directly where Saquon Barkley flows, and obviously it's a failed run play. These guys up front, the defensive line, the inside linebackers as well, they executed well on some of the stunts, some of the different alignments. You may or may not know this. The inside linebacker coach for San Francisco is actually KJ Wright. So that was a 3rd and 2. Like I said, on the second possession, this is just kind of an indication of how off track or inconsistently the Eagles approach things offensively in this game, but also throughout 2025. It's not like they just made poor choices in this loss to San Francisco. So they go empty on the very next play after a 3rd and 2 failed run concept, and San Francisco shows them this 5-1 look. So basically they've walked up Kendricks on the line of scrimmage, and the other inside linebacker is set up as the Mike, and they're just, showing man. I feel like they had tactical choices that they made against the Eagles to limit Philadelphia's options, if you will. In my opinion, in this alignment, this backer is just reading Jalen Hurts. They're looking for what Philly often does in some of these situations is pull one of the guards or the center and then run Jalen Hurts as, essentially a QB draw or QB log play. That's not what happens here. They got 2 wide receivers into the boundary, and I think it's Lenore up here on the top side against A.J. Brown. He just goes to an outside release vertical. The nickel, Upton Stout, really nice play on Devonta Smith to get a PD. Really could have been an interception. I think the announcers talked about this, that it was so close to being an interception. Jalen Hurts getting rid of the football so quick, it makes me think that, it was really predetermined about which side he was going to. And the 49ers, I think, kind of forced his hand. They put 5 guys up here on the line as potential blitzers with an inside linebacker who's stepping up as well. So, Jalen Hurts had some awareness of that pre-snap, obviously, and then maybe saw this post-snap, all 6 guys rushing, leaving everyone else pretty much locked up in man. So great play by Upton Stout. I think I maybe, pronounced his name wrong a moment ago. My apologies for that. He's got nothing in front of him but green grass, man. This could have clearly been a pick 6. Maybe changes the game, the dynamic a little bit, because like I said, it's 7-7 at this point. They get a stop on that 4th and 2, and the offense can't take advantage. Philly's defense is obviously great. near to the same level as the Seahawks, maybe fine, whatever. The idea here is, if you ask me, Seattle's defense is going to be able to impact what San Francisco does offensively. We saw that in Week 18 matchup. Kyle Shanahan's going to have adjustments. On this side of the ball, there is definitely a talent deficit for San Francisco with so many guys being out. And you kind of saw that early in the game. I think Philly scored 14 points on their first 4 possessions total. Or 10 points on the first 4 possessions total. My apologies for that. It's just third possession now. It's a 1st and 10 with the ball in the middle of the field, and it's a late nickel blitz by the same player who I just kind of highlighted or talked about, Upton Stout. They're playing man-free, but usually man-free, you have a inside linebacker or someone who's a second-level defender that'll kind of hang out in the middle of the field between 6 to 10 yards depth while everyone else plays man. These 2 linebackers do a really nice job on this particular play in coverage. Wallow is going to be on the running back, Saquon Barkley, and then Kendricks is going to be on the tight end, Dallas Goedert. And I thought Kendricks kind of played leverage extremely well against Goedert at times in this game. Am I saying that Kendricks can guard him man-to-man or that he could guard A.J. Barner? No. In fact, I would like that matchup. But he did a really nice job in the coverage schemes that he was assigned to deal with Goedert, of taking away the first look of Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, I felt like 4 or 5 times in this game, looked that way as either the first or the second read. I think he's, it's a right to left read for Jalen Hurts, so I think he's looking up here initially at that concept, coming back to the middle of the field, and Hurts quickly moved off of it in this case and a couple of others. It ends up being an incomplete pass. I think that San Francisco was prepared for the routes that they saw. Do I expect their inside linebackers to be able to come in and play athletes like these 2 guys this effectively if they continue to play these coverages? No. I would expect Seattle to be able to exploit that, but I have to show respect and evaluate the game as it actually occurred last week. Those guys did a great job on that route, if you ask me, against Barkley and Goedert. Another example of this, in fact, on the very next snap, it's a 2nd and 10. Like I said, from that third possession, ball's still in the middle of the field. So they're once again going to bring a late nickel blitz, and it's a snag flat concept. The only difference is they've got a wide receiver into the backfield. The Seahawks sometimes do this, clearly, with JSN. They're motioning a running back, I think it's Bigsby, across the field, and then snag flat to the backside, the bottom side of our screen. The difference is they're doing this with A.J. Brown on the snag, and then Devonta Smith out into the flats. It's another nickel blitz. Great play by, I think it's Jair Brown, 27. It was originally from Penn State. A tackle for loss here. Like I said, it's a 2nd and 10. Quick recognition. He knows that he's got the back because the nickel DB is blitzing. So we're talking about 20 is on a rush. Let's say the running back, well, it's Devonta Smith, so positionally he's a wide receiver, but he's lined up in the backfield. Let's say he was to leave, vacate. Well, then we can expect that Jair Brown is just going to visually focus and try to help out with A.J. Brown down here on the bottom side of the screen, matched up with Renardo Green. It's a really nice play here from an approach standpoint and the tackle. I want to call attention one more time. Kendricks against Goedert, the tight end, up to the top side of our screen. Really, this is a boundary side call down here, and the tight end and the trips and post motion, after the motion, ends up being set to what I would call the field, even though the ball was in the middle between the boundaries. I do feel like there will be some opportunities for Barner or even Arroyo if he's able to play, if he's completely healthy, to make some plays against these inside linebackers. This is the same possession, the third, after a penalty. On the Eagles, a 5-yard penalty pushed it back to, I believe, a 3rd and 14. So the corner and the safety to the bottom side are both going to essentially bracket Devonta Smith down here at the bottom side of the screen. You got all curls, all comebacks. All right, it's 3rd and 14. The line to gain is the negative 44, roughly there where I tried to draw that straight line. And how does this translate to JSN? That you may see this type of alignment trying to defend him. An outside leverage corner, a safety posted up. That's really what we've seen a whole lot against JSN in recent weeks. There's a lot of cushion, if you ask me. They're also really closing off Goedert in the middle of the field. Again, it's Kendricks and then the other safety. Hurts comes back down here to the bottom side of the screen. There's just a ton of cushion. I think it's Lenore. I believe that's Lenore number 2. Ton of cushion against Smith, gives up 13 yards on a 3rd and 4, and the Eagles end up getting the conversion, I think going down to take a 14-7 lead. We're going to move into the third quarter here, start to talk about some other guys up front, in particular on the defensive line, that San Francisco is relying on at this point, one of which is Bryce Huff. So he's moved around a little bit, obviously in recent years, the Jets, and then the Eagles, ironically, during their Super Bowl win. This is a 2nd and 2 on the 5th possession in the third quarter. Philly is up 13-10. So these stunts that San Francisco seem to run opposite of the back. So what I mean is the running back is on the 49ers left, the Eagles right, and they oftentimes appear to be running these stunts in the opposite directions. This is very well coordinated by Bryce Huff and Eric Kendricks. So what I mean is these two guys right here, they've executed what I call a gap exchange. So right now, Kendricks is responsible for the B gap, defensive tackle responsible for A gap, and Huff responsible for C. They just exchange the gaps because of Bryce Huff's post-snap movement, or what I would call a stunt. It really gave the Eagles problems. I think part of that is they're in these really poor stances, in my opinion, that, yeah, if a guy's on your tracks or where you expect him to be post-snap, you can deal with it. But if he's not, and in this case they execute a stunt, it stands them up. And so I'm talking about the pad level that these guys play with. Look how upright they end up being, and this is not an isolated situation. I've seen this in this game multiple times and prior to the 49ers 23-19 win in the wildcard round. The idea here for me is they're in really shitty stances for whatever reason. They're allowed to be, and it comes back to haunt them sometimes. San Francisco played with a better pad level, in my opinion. They played a more aggressive downhill style of defense than the Eagles, for whatever reason, were able to deal with. San Francisco did end up forcing a punt there after that tackle for loss by Bryce Huff. They really made the Eagles try to go deeper in their offensive bag than they're prepared to do so, or maybe than they want to. The conservative style that Sirianni and Hurts and those guys play, I feel like kind of came back to haunt them. I do not expect Seattle to do that. I think the Seahawks and Kubiak are going to attack on offense and try to put as many points on the board as possible, even though they only won that Week 18 matchup 13-3. Move forward here to the 7th possession. This is a great job, man, on a boundary side screen, or what is an attempted boundary side screen to Saquon Barkley. So first it's Huff and then Wallow. They're just going to match the numbers. So what I mean is you got Barkley as a potential receiver, the guy who would get the ball, and then also the left tackle kind of pass setting to draw Bryce Huff upfield. But Huff has great eyes, at least on this play, recognizes the screen, and I don't really think Jalen Hurts is trying to throw the football to the tight end here, but I'm just pointing out this dynamic to you as a Seahawks fan. If you've watched this long, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I know that it may be exhaustive, some of the things that I talk about that are not related to your team. I'm trying to give you as intricate or detailed a preview as I possibly can based on my knowledge. So 2 high safety structure with the ball on the left hash. Kendricks is going to be set to the field. I referred to it earlier on as the Mike. And you can see that he's matching up with the tight end. It could be 2-man, and that could be why Wallow is so quickly matching or recognizing the screen, because that's his man. In any case, whatever the call was, Huff recognizes it, number one. Wallow is there. If by some chance, Hurts was able to get it out to Barkley quickly, you do have the potential for a 3-on-2 with 2 blockers here and then Barkley catching the football. But Huff's recognition, Huff's awareness, he's a veteran. He's still young, but he's been around a long time. I think this is his 7th year in the league. Good player, way down on their depth chart if everyone else was healthy, right? Michael Williams, Nick Bosa, etc. The 49ers made the Eagles, they made things work without so many of their starters. Do I expect them to be able to come into Seattle and play this quality? No, but having said that, I want to reveal to you, or at least try to explain to you, the things that I think I'm seeing. And it was a pretty high level of football being played, by Kendricks, Wallow, Bryce Huff, as well. I'm not really focusing on the defensive line, not naming them, but those guys deserve credit too. They actually really set the tone. Another example to talk about Huff here, it's going to be a tackle for loss. They hold the Eagles to a field goal here, which I think is important. It ends up being 16-10. You've got another pre-snap alignment kind of giveaway, if you will. 80, the wide receiver, is compressed down here next to the tight end. I mean, it is 11 personnel, but I would say functionally when you get this alignment and you're under center, I'm talking about with number 80 specific to the Eagles, it's really a run play. So Huff is playing upfield a little bit against this tight end. I think he got a really lazy step by the tight end who ends up being pretty upright. You can see the pad level that Huff is playing with. Number one, he's able to get around him. Look how upright the tight end ends up being really quickly after the snap. We're not talking about a long time you're being asked to play football in a low pad level. I think some of that starts from the stance that those guys are allowed to play in. Of course, I'm talking about the tight end here, and generally the high stances for the Eagles are more specific to their offensive line. But in any case, Philly went up 16-10. I was rooting for the 49ers in this game. I don't know, for a lot of reasons. Number one, I think the Seahawks can beat them 7-8 times out of 10, even though they've split the two games, week 1 and week 18. But I also appreciated, and during the course of watching the game live, the physicality of guys like Kendricks, Wallow, Huff, Upton Stout, Jair Brown, and others. I think it's a really cool story that Robert Saleh and those guys have that they crafted last week. Having said that, I clearly hope it ends this week in Seattle. I want to talk about the final possession. Of course, the Eagles are able to get down, to the red zone or maybe just outside of it, so they deserve credit for that. But a lot of the things that the 49ers are doing, they're creating resistance on their end, number one, and making Philly's margin for error smaller. And I think Saleh's group created this style of gameplay, exacerbated the style of gameplay, the approach, I should say, that the Eagles have taken all year long, which most people have referred to as conservative. So this is a 1st and 10 on the final possession. Of course, they do end up converting a 4th down here and then a 3rd down a little bit later. These 4 verticals are just designed to isolate Kendricks on Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley's going to release out into the left flats, into the boundary. And, we're talking about 3 minutes left. A guy who wasn't signed to their roster until November. I think he actually came to Baltimore and talked to the front office about signing there. I kind of wish he had, because he's way better than our will linebackers. Rookie by the name of Buchanan, and then a 3rd-year guy, Trenton Simpson. Far more classy, if you ask me, and balanced than those guys. But you basically got zone droppers by the number 2 defenders here. Quarters, cover 4, whatever you want to refer to it as. People use different names to refer to the same coverage. But what they've done is they've isolated Kendricks on Barkley, and he's up to the task. I mean, it's a great play. First play of the drive, I think he tackles him for a 3-yard gain. Saquon Barkley, Hall of Fame talent. Kendricks, 1,100 career tackles. I think 14 career interceptions, something like that. He's compiled great stats in Minnesota and then Dallas. The Eagles are able to convert a 4th and 5, get the ball down to the 49ers red zone with about 1:30 left. I'm just trying to show respect to some of the guys that put up numbers in this game in terms of total tackles, and why there was so much resistance presented to the Eagles because of the intelligence some of these guys played with. This is going to be a sack with about 1:30 left, and it's because of a coverage adjustment that is quite simple, is executed very simply, I should say, by Kendricks and Wallow, the 2 inside linebackers. So you got 2 receivers set to the field, a 3rd receiver set to the boundary, Devonta Smith, along with a tight end and Saquon Barkley. I refer to this as 3 to the boundary. So normally what I look for first post-snap, if I recognize this formation, I'm talking about watching the NFL, is where does the Mike linebacker push? If the running back's feet were over here and the running back released to the field, you need the Mike over there. So you can play 4/3 to the field, the top side of our screen. As it stands here, or as it works out post-snap, Saquon Barkley is going to release to the bottom side, down into the flats. I call this snag smash. So you've got a snag route by Devonta Smith, a flat concept by Saquon Barkley, and then a pseudo smash route by the tight end Dallas Goedert. Normally, this ends up being a 3-on-3. It doesn't here because Kendricks pushes to the boundary, so he pushes to help out, and that allows Wallow to push to the flat. So they end up playing 4/3, just like they should, into the boundary. 1, 2, 3, and then 4 by the 49ers are just trying to exceed the eligible offensive receivers numbers by 1. 4/3 down here into the boundary. 3/2 up to the top side of the field. That's just kind of inverted about the way that it normally would be. How does that impact Jalen Hurts? Well, he's looking for easy access. So he's looking for possibly Kendricks to work to the field and then create that 3-on-3 that I kind of referred to, and maybe ease of access to Devonta Smith or the running back out into the flats. He can't do either of those. Kendricks was inside leverage of Smith. Wallow would easily be able to come downhill on Saquon Barkley. Safety and corner, both able to deal with Dallas Goedert. It's all taken away quickly, so Jalen Hurts has to go to the field. It's a really nice job, if you ask me, of two veteran inside linebackers, recognizing the threat, the formation, and then shifting their post-snap alignment, or basically where they cover. And it results in a sack for Keion White, who's another guy that wasn't on their roster earlier in the year. I think he got traded away from the Patriots like week 5, week 6. You know, they're missing Michael Williams. They're missing Nick Bosa. 2 or 3 or 4 inside linebackers, Winter, Warner. I think Bethune is another guy. Are there some things that the Seahawks can take advantage of? Absolutely. I'm giving you an idea of what they were able to do well last week and how Kubiak might try to take advantage. So the final play, again, I think just illustrates the awareness of Eric Kendricks as a veteran inside linebacker. So you're talking about what ends up looking like a cover 4 or quarters, if you will, out of a mug look. So all of these guys lined up close to the line of scrimmage could be served as potential blitzers. They don't blitz all of them. In fact, they only bring 4. And Kendricks is the guy who drops out. He's going to end up defending this route from Goddard. Yes, is Jalen Hurts staring at him a factor? Sure, it actually is. But look post-snap where Kendricks looks. I think he knows the concept. Once he looks out here to, his right, our bottom side of the screen, I'm talking about his eyes, immediately looking for 2. So reading 2 to 1, you number from outside in, okay? Even though I wrote it the reverse of that. But you number from outside in. So he sees that 2 is going vertical, and I think he immediately snaps back to the quarterback, sees Jalen Hurts staring down this route or staring down, Goddard, he doesn't know the route, and then tries to work over there, nearly picks it off, which would have been a storybook ending for him. It was already good enough, right, for the 49ers to get a win. They closed down a lot of ease of access to Jalen Hurts in the pass game, but also in the run game because of the veteran smart play of Kendricks and even Wallow, who's a guy that, I didn't know anything about, really didn't even know his name prior to this road win for the 49ers. Look, I think it's obvious the NFC West is the best division in football. There's just no question. You've got 3 teams alive this weekend in the NFC, and 2 of them are playing each other. If you had just a all-encompassing tournament, it makes me wonder if 3 NFC teams would still be alive once you got to the final 4 or, maybe the final 8. This is a great matchup. 2 West Coast teams playing each other, 2 NFC West teams rematching again. I'm a fan of what they did on defense. I think there's an interesting dynamic that's happened this year, and it kind of relates to JSN and how unbelievable he was early in the year. I'll touch on that a little bit here at the end. I do think the Seahawks can take advantage of some of these things that I've shown you. Attack the inside linebackers with the pass game. Sure, right? I think most of that is going to be done through under center play action, to be honest with you. Over routes, which has been huge for Kubiak in 2025, creating that horizontal conflict, run action to one side, and then the over concept, which emanates from the same side as the run action, goes over the second level of the defense, puts them in a bind. Commitment to the run game, find out if it can carry you again, right? The San Francisco 49ers, Robert Saleh, they have to make some adjustments from Week 18, where Seattle came there and ran for 180 on 39 carries. If you get to 180 this week, you win the football game. I think, the bare minimum is if you can get to 135, 140 on 28, 30 carries, that's a plus. You get to 155, 160 on those same 28, 30, maybe 33 carries, that's going to be huge because it means you'll possess the football, probably be protecting it, keeping Darnold clean in the pass game. I mean, you throw the ball at a time and place of your choosing. I would like to get the inside linebackers matched up on Barner. Or Arroyo if he's a go. I have no idea his status, like I said earlier. I think San Francisco's willingness or their tactical choices they make as it relates to JSN is probably the biggest component here for me, tied with the run game efficiency and the commitment by Kubiak. I think, you always have to say outside of turnovers, right, by either side. And the Seahawks defense can obviously force a few. Not focusing on Mike McDonald and Aiden Thurday's defense here. I already did a video on that that came out, I think, Monday at this point. The two elements for me, run game efficiency / commitment, and then the play action concepts that flow from it. I'm lumping that all together as number one. But number two, it's JSN, how the 49ers deal with him. Do they deal with him in a balanced way, or do they kind of overcommit resources? And what I mean by that is, look at the progression of Seattle's offense with the run game in the last, I think, 9 games, 1,200 yards. Maybe it's even closer to 1,300 yards. I think it's 1,280 or 1,260. Specifically, the last 3, 171 per game. I think you can see a direct correlation to JSN's yards per target. So read out some stats related to that. And I think Saleh's first tactical choice, well, one of the first, has got to be identifying JSN. How do we want to defend him? Do we want to betray our structure and try to put Lenore on him as much as possible? I'm not sure that they want to do that. If they do, and they try to single cover JSN a larger portion of the time than most teams have lately, I think they open themselves up to giving up big plays. So for the year, JSN is at 11 yards per target for the season. That's 8th in the NFL, all right? Up to the point the road win over the Titans, 30-24, that got too close, there at the end. Anyway, up through that point, I should say, JSN finished that day with 8 catches, 167 yards, and 2 touchdowns. His yards per target to that point, this is just some of the numbers. I'm talking about each game. 16.7, 15.5, 14.3, 12.5, 15.8. I think there's a couple in there that are like 9.2, maybe a couple in the 10s or the 11s range. I didn't read out all of them. The point here for me is he's making big plays down the field, high efficiency level from a catch to target standpoint, his catch percentage. But since then, the numbers have been different. And I don't think it's JSN's fault or Sam Darnold or Clint Kubiak. I think defenses have clearly adjusted. And then Kubiak and his staff adjusted from that. They countered the counter. So JSN, after that Titans game, he does have 39 catches, 480 yards. Those 39 catches come on 56 targets. That would work out to 8.57, let's round up, 8.6 yards per target. That would, over season-long data, drop him down to 48th. I don't think anything changed with JSN. Nothing certainly changed with Clint Kubiak and what he wanted to call. Maybe Darnold had some plays, some times where he didn't throw the football to JSN. I think that's a part of it because I think teams are overcompensating. Basically bracketing, leveraging, shifting the coverage, kind of like you saw with the inside linebacker shifting their coverage into the boundary on that first down play, to Saquon Barkley when he pushed out into the flats. And then Jalen Hurts ended up getting sacked by Keon White. My point is, Robert Saleh's tactical choice there could possibly choose the manner of San Francisco's demise if Seattle's able to get the win here, if they're able to execute offensively and keep this thing going. I am certainly rooting for that. Do I expect Seattle to win? Yes, of course, but my opinion is a little bit skewed. A, I have a rooting interest. B, I've watched a ton of Seahawks film and not as much of the 49ers. I did watch this one a lot, Monday night, into Tuesday morning to try to produce this video. I recognize that it didn't include any Seahawks film at all, so if you didn't enjoy it, you're obviously not listening at this point at the 40-minute mark. Anyway, if you did like it, first of all, please let me know in the comment section. I try to produce long-form content, not normally in the 40-minute range, but I'd like to get done with a couple of more previews here for this game. The next one that I do will most likely focus on the Seahawks pass rush and their reps from an end zone angle against San Francisco in Week 1 and then in Week 18. How can they get to the quarterback, Brock Purdy? How can they disrupt his flow and hopefully repeat the defensive performance that they put out there in the road win in San Francisco in Week 18? If you guys enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments section, like I said. And finally, if you think other Seahawks fans would enjoy this film study look at the 49ers defense, what they were able to rely on, who they were able to rely on, I should say, the most to get a win in Philadelphia in the wildcard round, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.